Good evening and welcome. I hope you all enjoyed tonight's movie, Standing Up, Falling Down. Tonight's showing sponsored by the Rotary Club of Teaneck. My name's Daniel Rynhold, and tonight we're extremely fortunate to be joined for this talkback by three very special guests who all work in comedy. So let me briefly introduce you two. First, we have Areshia McFarlin, who's a stand-up comedian, writer, producer, classically trained actress. Originally from Atlanta, though now based in New Jersey, Areshia has written TV pilots, feature films, has appeared on stage film, TV shows, including Law and Order. She won a year-long residency in 2018 at the Broadway Comedy Club, New York, and performs regularly in comedy clubs across New York City. Welcome, Areshia. We also have with us Barry Waldman. Barry is a consultant and marketer by day, who realized several years ago that his crazy parents, his words, not mine, I've never met them, I'm sure they're lovely. Anyway, his crazy parents realized that and life in general would provide enough material to begin a part-time career in comedy. Barry's performed at the New York Comedy Club, the Stand, the Broadway Comedy Club, and over the past 8 months has been performing virtually for comedy fans around the world. Welcome, Barry.
Thank you.
And finally, Elon Gold, a comedian and actor familiar to many of you, no doubt, from his many TV appearances. Just a few highlights include...
Come on, let's be honest. I'm familiar to nobody. Come on, familiar to... Seriously, this is probably my biggest career moment right here. This is... By the way, are we on YouTube? I always wanted to know, how do you get on YouTube?
They've got us on there somehow. We're
you have
on
to audition.
Like, you know.
You
have to audition to broadcast yourself.
That's right.
Get the Tonight Show. This is your biggest moment. This is it.
Yes.
Now's your time to shine, baby.
By the way, keep going because people want to hear about all my canceled sitcoms. Sorry.
It's okay, I left those out.
Those are the best ones.
Elon also had a recurring role on the hit show Bones and has guest starred on Frasier, The Mentalist, and Chappelle Show, among others. His 1-hour stand-up special on Netflix received wide acclaim and is now available for streaming on Amazon Prime. Welcome to all of you, and thank you really for taking time to be with us tonight. Before we begin, a reminder to those of you watching that this is live. So should you wish to ask our panel any questions, please do submit them via the chat, and I will do my best to cram in as many as I can in the last 10 minutes.
And you could also just call me directly. It's 555-3792.
But to begin with, I'd like to ask you all, at the beginning of the movie, we see Scott, played by Ben Schwartz, performing in a dreadful space to complete and utter apathy. So let me ask you, what made you get into stand up and risk that? And if you're willing to share, what was your worst ever gig and how did you cope with dying so publicly? If I could, I'll start with you, Areshia. Is that...
Let's think. So the first part of the question was, have I ever performed somewhere like that? Absolutely. Just this morning. No, I think that we've all probably done some rooms that weren't our best, and falling on stage is kind of fun because you could just act like you're not well, right? Like I always feign sickness or illness when things aren't going well. I start saying, that I'm sick. Now that we don't have to wear the mask, I'll just start coughing and whatnot. And I'm sure you get right out of it.
Barry,
doesn't that work? That nobody else does that?
That's good. I'm going to use that though.
I literally die on stage, just start falling out. That's when that classical acting just kicks in, Well,
you got that. That's great.
Yeah.
For me, I would say I first tried out for an improv comedy troupe in college, and I don't know what happened, but I got down on like my all fours and I was doing horse noise, all this stupid stuff, and miraculously, as you can imagine, I did not make it. And I'm like, but I started writing and I realized, well, that's not my style of comedy anyway. And I started writing for many years. But I had a fear of, even though I'd been doing comedy for my friends and family and everyone around me, it took a push to really get me on stage. But in terms of like that moment that Scott has in the beginning, we've all been there. And one of mine was at this place called the Triad Theater, which is I live in the city. It's on the Upper West Side. It's a narrow theater with gold on the wall. It's actually a very beautiful place, just not a place for comedy. It's very bizarre. The stage is set back, and it's intended for performances, not for comedians. So you're up there and you can't hear a thing. And my wife said, "Oh, you did really well, and great laughs." I'm like, up there, it was crickets. And one comedian described it, again, this long, narrow, gold-adorned room, like B. Arthur's vagina. I don't even know what that means, but I thought, okay, this comedian is the only one that got a trickle of laughs. And I said to him, I said, "How did you do that?" Everyone, I said, "Wow, it was a bad audience." And I was new into comedy then. He said, "No, never blame the audience. You got to go after them. Go after those millennials playing on their phones. Just go at them." And because right up to that point, it was only my 4th time on stage. I'd been kind of just going through my set the way I wanted to. And from that point on, I'm like, no, I'm going to work the room. I'm going to work people, find people who are reacting in one way or another, and use that to my benefit. So that was the learning moment. So the failures, or not failures, but not the prettiest moments, led to, better things in a sense.
Yeah.
First of all, I'm still reeling from hearing the V word. I can't even repeat it. It is so offensive.
Well, that with B. Arthur together is just mind-blowing.
Right. But that's what makes it good. B. Arthur's vagina makes it okay. Who's not going to talk about B. Arthur's? By the way, being third, and the fact that this was a 2-parter, I forgot everything. Something about bad gigs. Oh yeah, bad gigs after 30 years in comedy. I know I look amazing. You lose track. It's all the time. The good news is in the last 10 years, the bad gigs and the hell gigs are so few and far between. You still miss every now and then and you bomb. But the first 10 years, like I remember I was touring colleges, you'd play these nooner, in their cafeteria. And I remember one time in the middle of the show, one of the students just threw a snowball at me. Like there were literally, I remember this college student just turned to me and went, "Can you keep it down? I'm reading." And I'm like, "Well, there's a library right next to this, is the cafeteria, we're doing a comedy show. So, that's one hell gig out of hundreds and maybe thousands. And then, you get to a place where you really learn how to do it. You learn how to handle any situation, any crowd, any heckler. And again, you tend to have less and less in those as you progress. Now, again, what was the second part of the question? Because I can't,
That was fine. What was your worst gig and how did you cope with dying publicly? So that's kind you're good.
You just have to keep going. The key is to keep going. And also, the elephant in the room is so important. If you don't recognize the bomb, then that's embarrassing. It's embarrassing because the audience goes, "Does he know nobody likes him here? Does he know he hasn't gotten a laugh in 20 minutes? If you don't acknowledge it and own it and go, "Well, this isn't the best show of my life," then that relaxes everybody and it relaxes you, and you can get back to your act and back to jokes and maybe, just maybe recover. Sometimes you never recover. You go home and you just get depressed, which is why we have this.
Oh, Lord.
L'chaim, everybody.
I purposefully do not drink or smoke or do anything before I perform for just that reason. That liquid courage can get you into a lot of trouble.
Can I tell my fellow comedians a quick tip on performing that I discovered a few weeks ago?
Please.
So some of the greatest comedians of all time, like Richard Pryor, like Robin Williams, let's just call it performance enhancing drugs, whatever they were, it may be cocaine, whatever. So I'm not a drug guy, but I did discover something that has enhanced. And again, these are Zoom shows. I haven't been on a stage in 8 months, but that has enhanced my just clarity, my memory, just your cognizance. And it's this thing, it's from like a Whole Foods, you can get it anywhere. And because I'm going to say the word mushrooms, but again, not the drug mushrooms. That may be the better version of this. It's this powdered mushroom. It comes in a bag. I got to get the brand name. And I'm telling you, I mixed it in with a drink, and my last 3 or 4 shows, I'm just sharper and quicker. In fact, if I feel slow or unfunny tonight, it's because I forgot to take the stuff.
So we've had a couple of interesting questions on the chat.
By the way, nothing on that. My messages don't do drugs.
I mean, cocaine, vaginas, shrooms.
It came across clear.
I'm a clean comic. This is not the room for me. Y'all have a good night. What's happening here? Drug advice. Thank you so much for that.
So coincidentally, I saw an article last night. It was on the BBC News website. And this British Iranian comedian, I don't know if you know Omid Jalili, he's been in.
Great, he's great.
Yeah. And he said he felt COVID had improved him as a comic. So I'm interested both in how the industry has changed in general during your time in it, but more specifically, whether you think there'll be any lasting impact either on the industry or on you as comics as a result of this steaming pile of 2020 that we've all been living through.
Can I go first so I don't forget the question?
Yeah, go for it.
I will forget the question unless I go right now. First of all, yes, everything has changed, and we all we've adjusted to sort of these Zoom shows. And by the way, I did it literally a couple of weeks ago, did a Zoom show to Australia. So I had to like wake up at 3 a.m. The show was like 4 a.m. and I was exhausted for 2 days. I had no idea that you could get jet lag Zooming to Australia, which was a new thing that I realized. But the Zoom is just so different and you have to adapt and adjust. There's no one there. It's like you could think, when I think about my comedy ancestors, I'm sure they weren't like, this vaudeville thing is good, but wait till we get into a room by ourselves and everyone else is in their rooms by themselves.
Yes.
That's going to be ideal for stand-up and for performing. So it's obviously not ideal. It's the opposite of ideal. It is what it is. It lacks being in a room with a crowd, whether it's 100 or 1,000. It lacks the tension, the danger, the excitement and the drama, but you sort of just have to accept it and say, well, it's better than nothing. And it's okay. It's not the hottest, most exciting. You know what I like in the Zoom shows too? Going to bed with the wife. It's a similar approach. It's like, I'm grateful for the opportunity. Is this going to be the best night of either of our lives? Probably not. Thank you for having me, though. And listen, I will do my best to perform. I can promise you that. I will do my best to perform. I'm going to try not to make this a humiliating experience for either of us. So I'm going to do my best not to peak early, and whatever you do in the middle of this, don't start peeing. And then it's. You know what I mean? The Zoom show and being with the wife after all the years, it's not, you don't have that kind of like, oh my God, I'm going to knock your socks off. No, it is what it is. Mm-hmm. You have to accept it for what it is. Mm-hmm. And I'm not expecting cheering or woo or accolades, like sometimes I won't even know how it went until after, when I get that text like, hey, that was fun. Great energy. Thanks for not just phoning it in like the others, which is a weird text to get from your wife when she's right there and you're like, what, you couldn't have just told me this? And what others? There are others? Anyway, the point is you adapt, you adjust. Some guys like, I'm dating all these different women, and then they have one woman for the rest of their lives. And it's like, you know what? You make the best of that situation, as I do. And it's like, I'm used to being not with a different woman every night, in a different club every night, with a different audience every night. And now I'm just alone and the audience is on Zoom, and you adapt and adjust to that. And you know what? Appreciate what you have when you have it, because everything and whatever it is better than nothing.
Areshia, do you want to take that question?
She can't follow that.
Well, listen, my perspective on Zooms are a little bit different. Not much. I think of marriage in a much different way. So that's a whole nother story. That's a different Zoom. I think that Zoom is actually good for it. So first of all, Zoom makes you look a lot slimmer. as opposed to standing flat-footed on the stage in front of people. And I noticed that, if you do it from an angle, you really can look slimmed down. So I'm enjoying the effects. I like to do Zooms with the everybody off their mute and in a gallery view, because I very much like to, I like the little bit of feedback, or if you're watching TV in the background, I want to tune in too. But I really like to do a lot of crowd work in a Zoom, right? Like, take, for example, Barry sitting there, looking just kind of like a head, like a talking head. We would have a lot of conversation about the photos there, and the fact that Elon doesn't have on pants. Like, we would have these conversations, and you can do that on Zoom where that probably wouldn't occur in the club. Right. So I like the engagement. And I actually think, on a very serious note, I do think that the pandemic is having a very serious effect on performance of all kind, not just stand up. There is an initiative out there right now called Save Our Stages. Reach out to your congressman.
Yes.
Do the work you can, because I need to work. I have no other way to pay my bills. I need to work. So let's keep a stage open, or else I'm gonna end up on a pole, and nobody wants to see that.
I do. Wait a minute.
Again.
You see,
Wait,
and I bet his wife, and then now the wife's gonna come in the room. She'd be like, "Oh yes, that's the other person." Not tonight. Not tonight, Elon.
Areshia, by the way,
Yes.
I couldn't agree with you more about what you said and about hearing. It's so important that people are unmuted. But if you're playing to like 100 people, you can't have all 100 unmuted, because there are babies and dogs and cell phones and honks.
You just gotta invite that in. That's no different than when you're in the club and you got people that pull out their cell phones and start trying to tape you.
Nobody pulls out a baby at a comedy club, a screaming, crying baby.
Well, in New York they do.
I was about to say, in New York, anything's like what.
That's
but I mean,
true.
I do a lot of baby showers. This happens.
And on a Zoom, you never know what they're going to pull out. Look at Jeffrey Tobin. Anyway, the point is, too soon?
No, perfect. Well,
Go ahead, Barry.
No, I was going to jump in. I have smaller kids, 8 and 10, and COVID. I work from home a fair amount, and I thought, oh my gosh, my wife's here now. I'm going to have sex all the time. Like, it's going to be just fantastic. This is built in. Like, we don't have to we arrange our schedules, and we're in a New York apartment. She can't hide from me for that long. But oh my God, all she wants is a freaking coffee, and there's 50 more excuses. And then the problem became in COVID. Now my kids came in a week or so later, and they're on cameras. There's cameras everywhere in my home. I have walked in front of the camera. Their teachers know me by the type of underwear I wear. And I just, I could deny it, but it literally came up on a principal's call this week. I'm like, you got to embrace it after a while. There's cameras everywhere. It's like a porn shoot, but without the action, right? But
exactly.
But the truth is, I actually took the opportunity, kind of the silver lining, like Areshia was talking about, is during COVID, I'd been really, hesitant about putting a lot of stuff online and even performing online for sure. Yeah. And a lot of friends were like, no, you got to do something. This was back in April, May, and people were really pent up before the summer, and they just look at, they would watch you paint your wall at that point. You could do anything. And we have, my wife's from Brazil. We have friends from around the world. I did shows with people in 5 continents and Australia, every different time zone you can imagine. And I was trying to figure out, exactly like Elon said, the crowd, do you mute them? Do you not? Because you got the delay in there. So we did a few different things. We watched what SNL did with the news the first time and tried a few different things ourselves. And it was great. Got great feedback, did some other shows, got some other work because of that, believe it or not, which is crazy. And I use that as an opportunity to kind of push myself out of my comfort zone, I guess, is what I would say. So that's a silver lining. But I really crave like these guys, just to be back on a stage again, holding a mic and, doing my thing and interacting with the crowd, because that's hard. The one thing I did in COVID, though, which was kind of cool, we've experimented with a few things, but Facebook Live, where comments are kind of, streaming in. It's a little bit delayed, but I'd have my wife kind of be like producer, and she's kind of feeding me like, oh, this guy wants to hear about this. And I would just kind of go off on a tangent as if someone almost heckled me in a club, and it became kind of fun. But, as Elon said, there's not a lot of risk there, but, there's a little bit. It's not the same danger zone, but it felt good. It felt good.
Do y'all still talk on regular phones? I only do FaceTime and video calls now. Do you talk regular phone up to your face?
No. What is this, 1981?
I know, right? especially when they said that, you could start, your phone was going to be a danger zone too. You could get the COVID on your face. I only do virtual calls now. I don't dial anybody. I don't pick up the phone and put it to my head.
And by the way, like anything that has its pros and cons, even pandemics. So yes, we miss the energy of a crowd, but what I don't miss is the planes, trains, and automobiles to get to the gig. There's something very nice about being in your house and just going, all right, I got a gig. I'll be back in an hour. Oh, you're not coming back tomorrow? No, I'll be back in an hour. And that is a beautiful thing. The other beautiful thing you were talking about, Barry, Zoom school. I got to say, I pray for the pandemic to end. I pray for the vaccine. I still want to keep parent-teacher conferences on Zooms. Please let me never, Barry, let me never drive to that scale. You got to see them face to face. It's so much easier, the parent-teacher.
Funerals too. Everything. Let's put it all on Zoom.
Although I gotta say,
I like a good in-person funeral. I like it. If you've never been to a Black funeral, you don't know what you're missing. I like the choir. I like the falling out. I like the testifying. I like the girlfriend that walks in and messes the whole thing up. I like a good in-person funeral.
Yeah. And don't get me wrong. I like an in-person funeral. What I like about it, and I'm not trying to be funny here, is we've actually been to a few with people around the world that we never would have been able to go to, right?
True.
In normal space. Right. In that regard, meaning like I would still go if it's a friend, it's close, whatever, of course. But I like the fact that there's this connection now. And I think some of that stays on afterwards. I really think people are going to want to share, even the bar mitzvahs now, and the weddings, people want to share, and they never would have been able to go before. Now in the future, I think there's going to be an online option, just like maybe this film festival in the future, things like that.
Yeah, there will be online options. And I am trying to be funny here when I say I draw the line at the Zoom Shiva. And I'm sorry for the non-Jews who are going to miss out on this, on really relating to this. But if you've ever been to a Zoom Shiva, it's like you're on gallery view with it's like a depressing Brady Bunch. Instead of everyone smiling, it's like, I'm sorry. I know. Sorry. Terrible. Listen, he sounded like an incredible person. I'm so sorry I never met him. Have we met, by the way? I don't think we've met. I just got an email and it said Zoom Shiva. I clicked. Anyway, so sorry. Those are the most awkward things. You never know when to talk. Do I say something that? Yeah. Oh, so I can't wait till the Zoom Shivas end.
Yeah. And everyone's unmuted too, Elon. Everyone's unmuted at the same time. It's a mess. Yeah.
On a slightly more serious note, especially right now, cancel culture is all the rage. Are there any subjects that you think are or should be taboo in comedy? And maybe also, have you ever had a line or a routine that you've thought twice about or regretted? Barry, shall we kick off with you on that one?
All right. So this may not be fully politically correct. Listen, I absolutely respect all the movements that are going on right now. My take on this as a comedian is I like to embrace what is going on. So I think there's so many industries and every talking head on TV, there's so many eggshells that people walk on. And if Kevin Hart or someone made a joke 10 years ago, you're going to, just flail him for that. That stuff I think is a little bit silly. And maybe this is another question you're going to ask, Dan, but like some of the comics that I look back at that inspired me along the way, like a Don Rickles, or even more recent, like a Bill Burr, they're not afraid to confront it. You don't always agree, and sometimes they cross the line. I think there are probably some subjects that are totally not appropriate, or you have to handle it a certain way. But you can't, as a comedian, you can't be afraid to make fun of yourself and be an equal opportunity offender, if you will. And now I forgot the second part of the question. What was the second part? Sorry.
You got to stop with these two-parters. These two-parters are too difficult.
Is anything taboo?
What's that?
He said, is anything taboo?
Yeah. And also whether there's anything you've ever thought twice about or regretted.
No, but there are times where it's like that scene in Animal House where you have the devil on your shoulder. Like I could go for that. And I've probably done those, especially more in, smaller settings. No, I don't think anything on stage I've ever regretted. I think I probably could have even pushed it further. And I kind of am a little bit mad at myself for holding back a few times, to be honestly the flip of that, to be perfectly truthful.
Right. Areshia, and then I'll repeat the question because Elon will forget it.
Okay.
Ah,
I actually don't think that anything is taboo. I think that a good comic is going to stand flat-footed on the floor and tell their truth. And I think we should be allowed to do that. There should be a space for that. I think that people should know when you come to a comedy club / Zoom that you're liable to hear anything. And maybe my brand of comedy is or is not for you, but we're going to figure that out in a few minutes. I don't think that comics should have to, I honestly don't think anybody should have to censor themselves, but I especially don't think that comics should even censor themselves, because there's an element of truth to every joke. And there's something that needs to be said. And I feel like as comics, we have a responsibility to put that truth out there. Now, I don't believe in the type of comedy that means you're out, being offensive and hurting people or whatever, but that doesn't mean that I won't say something that may offend you, right? There's two different approaches to that. I love a good, honest comic like a Dave Chappelle. I like it. And I think he should keep doing it. And, I think that all of us have to keep pushing the barriers. We have to keep pushing, keep moving that line, because if we don't, we're going to turn to a society of just robots that are just, all doing the same thing all the time. And nobody thinks that's funny.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. Right now, I found that some of the most honest and incisive political analysis is coming from comedians, because news shows are either partisan or too scared to say stuff. So you actually find comics saying stuff that's most meaningful. Elon, what about you?
yeah, no, I second everything that they were saying. It's not only free speech, but it's so important to get these messages out. And there's no better way to get a message out than with a joke, because it makes you laugh and then think. And that's what these guys are doing, like Chappelle, Rock, Burr, as edgy as they are and as not woke as they are, they still are very woke in what the message of, loving each other, of equality, it's all the messages of the liberal woke, but in this anti-woke state. And that to me is perfect. And there's no joke that's offensive if it comes from the heart and the right place of, I love all people, I love inclusion, but I'm going to make fun of this about you guys, and this about Jews, and this about blacks, and this about, but I do it out of love, because there's such a difference between comedy and hate speech. There's no excuse for hate speech. If you're a hater, then I don't want to hear what you have to say. If you're a comedian and you're doing a stereotype or something offensive, I still want to hear it, because I know you're mocking the hater in exposing them. There's nothing like showing the prejudice of people, of these ignorance, with jokes. And so that's why when you ask, is there anything that I regret? Nothing I regret, other than something that wasn't funny, because my heart is almost always in the right place. And if it comes from that place, I wouldn't regret it.
Right. There's actually an interesting question following up on that from Susan, which is, has the extreme political split in the US made it harder for you if so many jokes are going to fall flat for about half the population?
Not me, because I do this whole set about being a Republican, and it just, nobody sees it coming. And you don't know if I am or if I'm not, but I think that there's enough to be said. I think the last 4 years have been television gold. I've never watched so much CNN in all the days of my life. I think that it has been, if nothing else, great television. And I think that everybody, I think all of us kind of have an idea of what is good common sense and what's not. And when you can turn that on its head, I don't think it matters what side you're on. Funny is going to be funny is going to be funny. And even somebody who doesn't like your view can still find what you say funny.
Right.
And for me, I try to keep it's so nonpartisan, my comedy. It's like, I'll do Trump jokes, but it'll be just about the person and the insanity. Like the last clip I just put up today, at Elon Gold on Instagram, it makes fun of Trump in the way it's, what's the next step for him? And I just do a thing about how I think Trump's going to move to China. And because I love walls, I want to be close to a wall. They've got one of the greatest walls. They've got a fantastic wall. I want to be near a wall. And to me, it's making fun of the person. If you watch my special, I make fun of Obama. I admired Obama, but I will always make fun of the president, of politicians. I just try to do it in a way that the left and right will be like, oh yeah, again, that's just funny. Of course, the comments are Trump 2020 or Trump's an idiot. You know, the comments become politicized, but I'm just doing comedy and just making fun of, poking fun of people.
Yeah.
Right. You've mentioned some names have floated around in some of your answers, but each of you want to talk about comics you admire or maybe inspired you. Did anyone inspire you to get into this, or you in any way model on? Obviously, you don't want to repeat what other people do, but who really, you know, were inspirational to you?
Well, Barry didn't get a chance to answer that last one, so let's let him go now.
Thank you. No, I appreciate that. So, you know, I wasn't even thinking about this originally, but you mentioned Chappelle, and a few years before I went on stage, there was the Boston Comedy Club when it was still around downtown.
Mhm.
And is the time when people were still smoking in New York, pre-Bloomberg. And I went there to see an open mic set and with my brother, and everyone went up. And this is when, again, I'm getting ready to, you know, perform myself or thinking about getting on stage myself. And people got up there, and some people were okay and they did a minute, some people did 5 minutes. And then a woman got up there and said, she froze. I mean, literally, I've never seen anything like this in my life before, since, then, anything like this. She looked at the, you know, the audience and said, I have an air conditioner, and then walked off. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm never going on stage, you know? And then the other end of the spectrum, like after this horrible open mic, Chappelle comes on, which was a surprise guest, and he does like an hour and a half. And this is around the time I think he was doing Nutty Professor and whatnot. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this guy is gold. So he was definitely inspiration, but I never thought I could even get on stage myself at that point. But, you know, Seinfeld, not so much from the show, but from the joke construction perspective. I mentioned Rickles and Burr earlier. Comedians I like now, you know, Maz Jobrani, who's a fantastic comic, Nikki Glazer, you know, so, you know, Elon Gold. I saw Elon Gold on The Tonight Show.
Come on.
12, 13 years ago, and the bit still sticks in my head. So there are a lot of folks like that, you know, that even Leno. So I used to live out in LA, and Leno's a guy who, you know, Elon knows he's a hard worker. This guy takes all his money, right, from stand-up, and that's all he lives on. The Tonight Show stuff, everything else he puts in the bank, and he still comes back. And I lived a couple blocks away. That's how I know. He comes back to the Hermosa Comedy and Magic Club and performs like one Sunday every month, you know, to this day. And I saw him at Boston University.
I think it's every Sunday. Is
it now every Sunday?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's and while he was doing the Tonight Show, he would go every Sunday. And when I did my first Tonight Show, he turned to me in the commercial. He said, you know, I never touch my Tonight Show money. You know, I just make money from the road. You know, I don't touch this thing. You know?
Yeah. He would do, when he was doing the Tonight Show, he would do 200 nights, I think it was, a year of stand-up comedy while doing 4 or 5 nights a week. Right. And I got to speak to him a few times. Amazing guy. I saw him actually at Boston University when I was, this is back like the late 80s, looking to go to college myself. And I swear, I think he did 2.25 hours without one break, just him. So people like that really, you know, inspired me along the way.
Areshia, and this is probably going to have to be our last question, by the way, particularly as a female comic, were there female comedians or?
There were female comedians, but I remember very specifically, my sister was in high school and she brought home a cassette tape of Eddie Murphy's Raw. And we had to sneak to listen to it. And it was so good. And it was after seeing Raw that I discovered Delirious, and I went back, and I didn't know at the time that Bill Cosby had been a stand-up, because I only knew him from the Cosby Show. And my dad was like, oh, let me show you something. And he pulls out Cosby, and I listened to him, and as watching the Cosby Show, I remember thinking to myself, that's what I want to do. Like, I can do that. That's what I want to do. And and then I saw George Carlin. I saw him do a set that always sticks in my head is, I've never forgotten it. He always talked about, there was this one bit he did about saying prayers, and he was like, I did a survey or something of the sort. The joke goes, but he's like, I prayed to Joe Pesci and I prayed to God, and 50% of the time, Joe Pesci, praying to Joe Pesci, I got the answers I wanted. Praying to God, I got the answers I wanted. And I remember thinking to myself, that's how I think in my head. Like there was something just very relatable about it all. And I guess I probably should have been interested in more female comics, but maybe not. Maybe I didn't have, that kind of exposure to it. But my favorite, I could listen to Dave Chappelle talk for hours. I could listen to Dave Chappelle all day and night. Eddie Murphy, hands down, is always going to be the case. It's not popular, but I still love Bill Cosby. The art, I always say, can you separate the art from the person? And I can easily.
It's okay. I still listen to Michael Jackson. It's okay.
I still got a little R. Kelly in my playlist.
Uh-oh.
I know,
now, wait
but
a second.
it's because you grow up in that age,
Right.
Some things you just can't let go. But yeah, I think that I do. Those are my favorites. And if I had to say a woman, I like Ellen. I really loved Whoopi Goldberg when she would do her One Woman. I really enjoyed that. And yeah, that's probably it. I don't want to.
And Joan Rivers also was like one of the best.
Oh, and you know who I knew? Who I knew personally, and she was really influential. This woman, Elaine Stritch. Do you remember Elaine Stritch?
Yeah.
Yes. So I used to. Well, long story short, I worked where she lived. It's a long story in one of my many survivor jobs, and Elaine poured into me so much of the business and what you got to do to survive and what you got to do to stay thin, like all these things. But she was really, really influential in my decision to go into stand-up.
And Daniel, how very apropos to the Teaneck Film Festival. Do you know who my hero was?
Go on.
Billy Crystal. Like literally Billy, it was Billy and Eddie Murphy. Just both those guys were like, oh my God, that's what I want to do. They just, again, like you were saying, Areshia, they just spoke to me. I went, I kind of think like those, the had those observations. I do impressions and voices also. Like, that's what I got to be. Today, it's, for me, Chris Rock is just the greatest, like as far as just powerful. Dave Chappelle, who I started with, who's a buddy, I don't even think of him as a comedian anymore because he transcends comedy. He's a poet with punchlines. He's not a comedian. He's too good to be a comedian. But Rock, just straight stand-up, just killer stand-up. Nobody is like Rock.
I want to thank you all so much
for
doing this evening. That we are being booted out. We are being
warming up
out.
What about the after party? Where's the after party?
That's just us on Zoom drinking. Tomorrow's movie, everybody, is Tumor Monk at 7:30 Eastern Time. Tickets on sale until an hour before the movie starts. Thank you and good night.